They're schemers. Schemers trying to control their little worlds. I'm not a schemer. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. And here we go.
Well, hello there, you amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. I hope you're all well. You're looking absolutely amazing on this beautiful Thursday. And this is video 2 of 2 on this Thursday. Yes, I thought I would do this video. This is going to be a bit of a rant. Yesterday, I did a video, right? And it was this article here, which is an interview that Bill Thompson did, the lead prosecutor in the Idaho 4 case. Do I say you're looking absolutely amazing? You are, by the way. And it's where he dispels baseless rumors and theories. Now, as we read through this article, we pretty much saw that this was more about baseless, wild speculation over Bryan Kohberger. He did, at the foot of it, mention the fact that there was surviving roommates and some things that had been said for them. But for the most part, this article had indeed covered wild speculation about Bryan Kohberger, about the fact that he was messaging the girls on social media, which he says, no, there wasn't. The connection to the house, the stalking that was actually stated in the PCA. He says he wasn't. We've got no connection between Bryan Kohberger and the house, nothing at all. Goes on to say that there was a car that looked like his in the area on the night, but they don't say it's his car, just that it looks like his. And ultimately, this is off the back end of Bryan Kohberger holding his hands up and saying, look, I'm the person who did it. I'm the person you want. He pleads guilty. And it's left everybody in a little bit of a situation now where they think, did he do it? Did he not do it? Because by all accounts, the case looks weak. It looks fairly weak. It looks circumstantial. The DNA situation could have likely been pulled apart. The knife sheath at the end of the day was a transportable object, and the DNA on there was not touch DNA. It was trace DNA that could have got onto that sheath in many, many ways, and that would have and could have been proven in the trial to be a fact. Look, we also hear about Amazon purchases, for instance, but even that, there seems to be multiple people in this area who were buying K-bar knives and selling them on or whatever, and we never got to see the rebuttal of that from the defense team. So we just saw one side of the argument, and it wasn't a flat-out slam dunk, I don't believe. And again, in the aftermath of it all, it appears the case is relatively weak and is just about speculation. But we, as people who are still sitting on the fence, and we feel a little bit like we've got whiplash in this case, are still getting attacked, whether that be in the comments, whether it be in the email, whether it be by other creators. And I feel that it has to be called out that this, to me, is slightly disingenuous. It's slightly disingenuous for people who have always been on the Bryan Kohberger is guilty camp to not even acknowledge some of the oddities in the documents. And I would go on as far as to say that if there are people out there around the community, whether they are channel creators, whether they are people who just exist in the comments, and they are simply pushing Bryan Kohberger's pled guilty, you shouldn't question it, you shouldn't look at anything else, then these people, to me, are not genuine people. They're not genuine, because even if you are somebody who thinks Bryan Kohberger could do this crime, I, for a long time, had gone through this journey not as a Bryan Kohberger is 100% innocent, but somebody who felt that Bryan Kohberger had not been proven 100% guilty. I wanted it to go to trial because I wanted to see everything play out in a trial setting, in accordance with the Founding Fathers' way, the way that they wanted it to go, the way that they felt justice had to be served, by everything to be shown and for a judgment to be made via a jury. We never got that. And some people will say, but that was Bryan Kohberger's choice. That was his choice. He's turned around and basically said, I don't want a trial. I don't want it to go to trial. I am pleading guilty to this crime, and I'm even happy to say I'm not going to appeal. But we know historically there have been cases that this has happened. And the Innocence Project have had to step in, and later on down the line, sometimes decades down the line, people have walked free because they have pled guilty to crimes, including murder, that they just simply didn't commit. And a lot of the time, this comes off the back end of them not wanting to be executed. The fear of death, the fear of actually dying, was enough for them to consider the fact that this trial and how it's gone, or this procedure, if you like, how it's gone, is shown so much hatred, so much bias in the community, that the fear is a very valid thought that you could end up, despite whether you're guilty or innocent, you could literally be executed. And if Brian Koberger with ASD on top of that, and maybe that means that he feels things differently, sees things differently, maybe that was just enough for him to think, oh, I don't want to die. If I turn around and say I did it, and admit to it, can I stay alive? And what are my options going forward? And maybe, and we have touched on the fact that we know that the door doesn't close; it remains ajar. It's definitely not locked in terms of could an appeal come later on down the line should more evidence comes out. You know, we've seen all of these docs. We've seen blood in Jack Showalter's property, for instance. And look, I would turn around and say, well, surely they would have investigated that and brought it to a conclusion. But if they did, would we not be able to see the documents that would suggest that it was? Maybe they're in there somewhere and we haven't seen them yet. Who knows? The point being that there seems to be a lot of questions. And again, this isn't about pointing the finger at anyone. This is about trying to make sense of this situation. And I feel that there are so many people out there who, in the aftermath of this, they're still unwilling to look at some of the information that's coming out, understand that this entire process didn't operate right. It wasn't right. The PCA from the jump was misleading. It was designed in a way that would push a false narrative of stalking that they have subsequently very heavily backpedaled on. We're literally got to the point where the lead prosecutor is saying this is a complete mystery because they have nothing that connects him to any of the victims, not to the home. So as much of 180 as you can possibly do has been done by the prosecution on stalking. That was the linchpin for a long time of their case, and still remains virulent to this day with so many people. If you go and look at comments of people in different communities, whether it be YouTube, whether it be Facebook, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, all of these sites that are talking about the Idaho 4 case, they're still pushing that Brian Koberger stalked the victims, that he was speaking to them in social media or on social media, and it just simply isn't true. So even though I accept and acknowledge that Brian Koberger has indeed pled guilty, I'm still left in this position where I think, why would you plead guilty to a case that looks weak as piss? And they don't seem to have anything, because you would think that he would have been being advised by Ann Taylor just how weak or volatile the case was. It wasn't a slam dunk. And again, maybe it was just the fatigue of going through all this. It was 2.5 years of court hearings in and out of court, seeing the multitude of things that were being spoken about in the media. Maybe it just become too much and Brian Koberger did this crime and it was just not worth the risk. Or maybe he didn't do this crime and it wasn't worth the risk. Who knows? Maybe later on down the line, maybe years down the line, we will see something and we will come back together and look at this completely different. Maybe some people, when this 41 days surpasses, which we've got about, 32, 33 days left, if there is no appeal whatsoever and we hear nothing, maybe that will be enough to again chip away at those willing to consider Brian Koberger was railroaded into a plea deal. Who knows? Who knows? But again, this video is about calling the people out who, despite whether they think Brian Koberger is guilty or not, they're unwilling to speak about the things that are still odd, still bizarre, still not right, because there is a lot of it that isn't right. You know, people still won't question the delay in calling 911 when we're literally seeing in new documents being released that there were screams heard, that there were sounds like a taser being used. You've got Bill Thompson himself, which I speak briefly on in video 1 today, saying that he believes that Dylan Mortensen was left alive because the person who did this crime more than likely believed that law enforcement had already been killed and was called, sorry, not killed, law enforcement killed. Law enforcement had been called and he needed to get out of there quickly. So even the killer, in the throes of everything, who likely heard and had to think, what could you have possibly heard? Could you have called 911? You should have called 911. But people still don't even want to call that out. They don't want to call out the fact that the PCA, again, as aforementioned, was worded in a way that would suggest stalking when subsequently we hear there is no stalking. That some of these channels that have been anti-Brian Kohberger and Brian Kohberger's guilty as for 2.5 years, they have been the antagonists of rumours that would include stalking, that would include speaking to them on social media, that would include many of these baseless claims, but they won't acknowledge them now. They won't turn around and say, look, Brian Kohberger's pled guilty, so, you know, he's more than likely the person who did it. He must have done it. Why would he plead guilty if he didn't do it? But they're unwilling to say, but, however, in the aftermath of that, was this right to be said? Did this work right? Is this system broken and has the Idaho 4 case been a window into a system that seems to, regardless of anything, when they don't have evidence, they utilize the public and strategically placed gag orders in order to force a scenario where the public then fills in all the gaps. Bill Thompson, right at the start, he said, share this far and wide, the PCA, share it far and wide, make sure that it gets out there. Bearing in mind that at that very moment, he fucking well knew that there was no connection, no stalker, no nothing. Nothing. Because even 2.5 years, he still couldn't find it. So at that point, he damn well knew there weren't anything. But he used the public as a weapon. There you go. Let me know down below how you feel about it. Should the people, even the people who were saying Brian Kohberger was guilty, should they at least be acknowledging the oddities in the new documentation? Should they be going back and saying, look, this wasn't handled right, it wasn't done right? Yes, Brian Kohberger at the end of the day pled guilty, so you got what you wanted, but are we seeing a repeat of Richard Allen, for instance? Whether you think Richard Allen is innocent or guilty, did the process work properly? Did the process work properly? Do the ends justify the means? Karen Reid, for instance. Karen Reid would have likely been put away had she have not had the funding. And I'm not saying she paid to be innocent. I'm saying if she hadn't have been able to pay to protect herself, she would have very likely been railroaded and been put away. It's a system that can be bought and sold. There's different standards of justice, it seems. You've got gold standard all the way down to wood and paper. And Brian Kohberger definitely had wood and paper. Love you all. Mwah.